The shrill sound of a baby's cry cut through the airplane cabin like an alarm, drawing irritated glances from weary passengers. Emily Sanders held her 6-month-old daughter, Lily, close to her chest, whispering frantic apologies to anyone within earshot. The baby's wails echoed even louder in the tight space of economy class, and Emily could practically feel the sharp sting of judgment behind every disapproving glance. "Please, sweetheart. Please," she murmured softly, rocking Lily with desperation in her arms. Exhaustion hung heavy in her voice, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. She hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. After pulling a grueling double shift at the diner back in Phoenix, she'd barely made it to this red-eye flight to Boston. The ticket had drained what little she had in savings, but she couldn't miss this. Her sister Brooke was getting married in 2 days, and even though their relationship had been strained for years, Emily couldn't bring herself to stay away. At just 23, Emily already felt like she had lived a lifetime. The deep shadows beneath her hazel eyes made her look older, and her once bright smile had faded after months of scraping by. Her ex-boyfriend had vanished the moment she told him she was pregnant, and she had faced the road of motherhood alone, one tiny step at a time in a cramped studio apartment barely fit for living. Every day was a painful choice between buying diapers or groceries, between paying rent or affording Lily's formula. Every dollar she earned was accounted for. There was no luxury, only survival. A stern-looking flight attendant in her 50s approached with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ma'am, you need to keep your baby quiet. People are trying to sleep." "I'm trying," Emily said softly, her voice cracking. "She's usually such a good baby. The flight's just thrown her off. The lights, the noise." The attendant raised a skeptical brow and moved on. Without another word, Emily sank deeper into her seat, humiliated. Lily's cries grew louder, and Emily noticed several passengers reaching for their phones. Some of them were probably filming. She knew exactly how this looked. A poor single mother who didn't have the decency to stay home. An elderly man across the aisle let out a heavy sigh and muttered, "Maybe you should have thought twice before dragging a baby onto a plane." Emily's chest tightened. She had thought about driving instead, but her beat-up Honda had broken down 3 weeks ago. There was no money to fix it, and this flight was her only way to make it to the wedding. She had spent rent money for this trip, next month's rent. The dread of explaining that to her landlord loomed in the back of her mind like a storm cloud. Tears welled up in her eyes as she unbuckled her seatbelt and prepared to carry Lily to the restroom in hopes of calming her down away from prying eyes. But before she could stand, a gentle voice from the seat beside her interrupted her panic. "Excuse me? Would you mind if I tried something?" She turned her head in surprise. The man seated next to her looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. Early 30s, neatly styled dark brown hair, kind blue eyes, and dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly income. His leather shoes were spotless, and his wrist bore a sleek platinum watch. He looked completely out of place among the cramped rows of coach. Emily blinked at him. What? "I've had a lot of practice with babies," he said with a warm smile. "My sister has 3 little ones. Sometimes a change of arms helps. Different voice, different smell. It can work wonders. Would you mind if I gave it a try?" She hesitated. Her instinct screamed caution. She had long stopped trusting strangers, especially men who took sudden interest in her or Lily. But there was something about his tone, his steady presence that felt safe, and she was desperate. "Okay," she whispered after a moment. Carefully, she passed Lily into his waiting arms. The effect was almost instant. As Lily settled against the stranger's chest, her sobs quieted to soft whimpers, and then miraculously to silence. He gently patted her back in slow, reassuring circles and hummed a soft melody, barely audible over the hum of the engine. It felt like magic. Emily stared, stunned. "How did you—" He smiled, still soothing the baby. "Told you, lots of practice." The tension that had gripped the cabin eased like a slow exhale. The glares from passengers faded. One woman even gave a small smile as she passed by on the way to the restroom. The same flight attendant who had scolded Emily earlier now offered a subtle nod of approval as she walked past again. "What's her name?" the man asked gently. "Lily," Emily replied, still watching him in disbelief. There was something vaguely familiar about his face, but she couldn't quite place it. "And I'm Emily. Nice to meet you both. I'm Nathan." He didn't offer a last name, just Nathan. Simple, unassuming. She gave a small, shaky laugh. "I don't know how to thank you. I was about to completely fall apart." "We've all been there," Nathan said with a soft chuckle. "Maybe not with a baby, but we've all had our breaking points." As Lily began to doze off in his arms, Emily allowed herself to breathe for the first time in what felt like days. She didn't know who this stranger really was, but in that moment, he felt like the first bit of kindness the world had offered her in a long, long time. Emily found herself watching Nathan more closely now. Not in suspicion, but in awe. He held Lily like it was the most natural thing in the world. One arm wrapped securely around her, his hand gently cradling her back. His other hand rested lightly on her tiny legs, keeping her tucked against him, like she belonged there. Emily noticed his crisp suit jacket was starting to wrinkle, a small patch of drool already dampening the shoulder. But he didn't flinch. He didn't grimace or try to adjust. If anything, he looked content. "You're not really supposed to be in economy, are you?" she asked after a moment, narrowing her eyes with suspicion masked as curiosity. Nathan gave her a mysterious smile. "Let's just say, sometimes I like to mix things up. First class can be a little too predictable." His tone was light, but there was a depth behind the words that made Emily pause. There was something about this man that didn't quite add up, but not in a bad way. In a complicated way. Still, she was too tired to dig deeper. For now, she was just thankful for the break. "I should probably take her back," Emily said half-heartedly, glancing at Lily, who now looked more peaceful than she had in weeks. "She's okay here if you want to rest," Nathan offered, without hesitation. "You look like you haven't slept in days." Emily opened her mouth to protest. She had grown used to carrying the weight alone, used to refusing help, even when it was drowning her. But her body betrayed her resolve. Her limbs were heavy, her eyelids heavier. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Absolutely. Rest. I've got her." And for the first time in a long time, Emily let herself surrender. She leaned back, letting her head fall gently to the side. It landed on Nathan's shoulder, a shoulder that was already serving as Lily's makeshift pillow. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. Instead, he adjusted just slightly so both mother and daughter could rest against him more comfortably. The warmth of his body, the low hum of the airplane engines, and the rhythm of Lily's steady breathing created a cocoon of comfort that Emily hadn't felt in months. Her last conscious thought was a single, fragile whisper. "Thank you." What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Nathan had been watching her long before he'd spoken up. He had seen her struggling, had watched the subtle panic in her eyes, the shaking in her hands, the quiet apologies she offered to people who didn't deserve them. And it had moved something in him. He hadn't stepped in out of pity. He'd stepped in because he saw something in her he couldn't ignore. Strength wrapped in exhaustion, love wrapped in anxiety, and a fire barely holding on beneath the weight of the world. What Emily also didn't know was that Nathan Caldwell wasn't just another passenger on a crowded flight to Boston. He was the CEO of the Caldwell Foundation, one of the country's largest philanthropic organizations. A man used to meetings with mayors, funding massive social projects and being the kind of person people chased for favors. And yet here he was, choosing to sit and coach, choosing to hold a crying baby, choosing to be simply Nathan, because tonight wasn't about his job, or his title, or his legacy. Tonight it was about a young mother and her baby, and the inexplicable feeling that meeting them might change his life forever. Emily woke slowly, like emerging from a warm dream she didn't want to leave. For the first time in what felt like weeks, she felt safe. She felt warm. And then, reality returned in pieces. She was still on the airplane, still tucked into an economy seat, still leaning against the shoulder of a stranger. Her eyes flew open in a small panic. She quickly straightened, realizing she had dozed off completely, her head resting on Nathan Caldwell's shoulder like they were longtime friends, instead of two people who had only just met. "Oh my God," she whispered, flustered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I can't believe I fell asleep on you." Nathan looked down at her with a calm, reassuring smile. "You were exhausted," he said gently. "And Lily didn't wake up once. You both needed the rest." Emily glanced down and saw Lily still in his arms, sleeping peacefully, as if the chaos earlier had never happened. She looked like a different child when she wasn't crying. Her tiny fingers curled around Nathan's lapel, her lips slightly parted in sleep. "She looks like an angel when she's like this," Nathan added, slowly transferring Lily back into Emily's arms with practiced care. "She really is," Emily whispered, her voice soft. "It's just, everything's been so hard lately. I feel like I'm barely holding it together most days." She hadn't meant to say it out loud, but something about the moment, the stillness of the cabin as the plane sailed through the night sky, made it easier to speak the truth. Nathan didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty comfort. He just waited, letting her speak at her own pace. "My ex left before Lily was born. I've been raising her by myself ever since. I work long hours at a diner just to keep the lights on. My car broke down a few weeks ago and I couldn't afford to fix it. I used the last of my savings for this flight just to go to a wedding where I'm not even sure I'm wanted." She paused, swallowing hard. "My sister and I haven't spoken in years. And the only reason I'm even going is because she's the only family I have left." The words fell between them like raindrops, quiet, steady, impossible to take back. Emily instantly regretted how much she had shared. She barely knew this man. Why had she just unloaded her entire life story on him? But Nathan didn't look uncomfortable. If anything, his blue eyes had softened. "That takes incredible strength," he said, after a long moment. "Raising a child on your own, holding things together when they're clearly falling apart, and still showing up for family, even when it hurts." Emily looked at him skeptically. "You don't even know me. For all you know, I could have made every wrong decision to get here." "Maybe," Nathan acknowledged. "But I've been watching you since we took off. The way you apologize to everyone, even the rude ones. How gently you handle your daughter, even when you're running on fumes. The fact that you're going to a wedding where you may not even be welcomed. Because it's the right thing to do." He let the words hang for a second. "People who make terrible choices don't behave like that, Emily. People who care deeply do." His words hit her harder than she expected. When was the last time someone had seen her, not just as a struggling waitress or a single mother, but as someone worth believing in? Her boss didn't. Her ex certainly didn't. Even her sister had treated her like a burden, and yet, here was a man she had just met, looking at her like she was someone who still had value. "What about you?" she asked suddenly, needing to shift the attention away. "You still haven't told me what you do for a living, and you still haven't explained why someone wearing a suit like that is sitting back here with the rest of us." Nathan's lips curved into a smile. "I work in business," he said vaguely. "And sometimes I fly economy because it reminds me what real life looks like. First class can feel disconnected. Up here, people are more interesting." "That's a very non-answer," Emily said, raising an eyebrow. "Are you secretly a spy? Should I be worried?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Nothing dangerous, I promise. Let's just say I'm in a position where I try to help people when I can, and it's easier to do that when there's no spotlight." Emily gave him a look that said she wasn't buying it entirely. But she didn't press. Not yet. Before she could respond, the captain's voice filled the cabin, announcing that they would be landing in Boston in 30 minutes. The lights brightened slightly, and the quiet buzz of the plane gave way to the rustling of passengers adjusting their seats, reaching for overhead bags, and preparing to land. Emily's heart sank. This moment, this rare connection, was about to end, and she wasn't ready to let it go. "This is probably where we say goodbye," Emily said quietly as the plane began its descent. Her voice touched, with a sadness she hadn't expected to feel. Nathan turned toward her, eyes steady and sincere. "I'm not really great at goodbyes," he replied, then paused. "Actually." He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a sleek, cream-colored business card. The texture was rich, and the black lettering gleamed under the cabin lights. "I was hoping I could give you this," he said, holding it out to her. "If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, please call." Emily took the card and read it. Her breath caught. The raised lettering read, "Nathan Caldwell, CEO. Caldwell Foundation," with an address in downtown Boston and a direct phone number below. Her eyes widened, disbelief and recognition washing over her all at once. Even someone scraping by in a Phoenix diner had heard of the Caldwell Foundation. They were famous, always in the news for charitable work, education reform, shelters for domestic abuse survivors, job training for veterans, housing support for single mothers. "You're Nathan Caldwell?" she whispered, staring down at the name. He gave her a sheepish smile. "Guilty as charged." Emily blinked. This wasn't just a good man in a nice suit. He was that man, the one behind the programs, the man with power, money, and reach far beyond anything she could ever imagine. "I was trying to avoid mentioning it," Nathan added. "I didn't want our conversation to be about that." "Why?" she asked, still stunned. "Because I wanted to talk to you as Nathan, not as someone people try to impress or ask for favors. I wanted you to talk to me like you did, and I didn't want you to change who you were just because of a title." Emily sat back in her seat, gripping the card. Suddenly so many things made sense. The first-class quality clothes, the confidence, the calm way he handled every interaction. But knowing who he was didn't make this easier. If anything, it made her heart race faster. "You could have stayed in first class," she said, not quite able to hide the edge in her voice. "You could have ignored the crying baby and let the flight attendants handle it. But you didn't." Nathan's smile faded slightly, his expression turning serious. "I didn't help you because I'm a CEO. I helped you because I saw a mother who needed support. That was it. No agenda." Emily looked down at the card again, her mind spinning. Was this a lifeline? Or a trap? Was he offering her help out of compassion or pity? And why did the idea of being seen as a charity case make her heart twist more than anything? Nathan seemed to sense the storm brewing in her chest. He spoke again, gently. "The card isn't charity, it's an opportunity, if you want it." As the plane touched down with a soft thud, Emily clutched the card in her hands, wondering whether this moment was a turning point in her life, or just the setup for another disappointment. The cabin lights flickered brighter as the plane taxied toward the gate. Passengers stood, reaching for their bags, crowding the narrow aisle in their usual rush to disembark. Nathan didn't move. He stayed seated beside her, calm and still, watching as she absorbed the weight of what had just happened. And Emily? She wasn't sure if her heart was racing from panic or from hope. She'd come to Boston expecting judgment and discomfort. What she found instead was something entirely unexpected, a man who saw her, a man who might be her future, or a man she should run from, and she didn't yet know which. The Boston airport was already bustling as the morning rush filled the terminal with noise, rolling suitcases, and voices echoing off polished tile. Emily shuffled forward through the jet bridge with Lily cradled in one arm and her old duffel bag, frayed and barely zipped, in the other. Everything she had packed for the wedding weekend was inside that bag, and everything she owned of real value was asleep against her chest. Beside her, Nathan walked quietly, still composed, still watching her with the same calm attentiveness that had comforted her on the plane. He made no effort to rush ahead, no show of impatience. When they stepped into the terminal, he glanced down at her. "Where are you staying for the wedding?" he asked. Emily hesitated, then answered truthfully. "A motel not far from the venue. It's nothing fancy, but it has a bed and a door that locks." Nathan's brows furrowed just slightly. "Boston's unpredictable in October. Some of those budget places don't even have proper heat. Have you considered—" "I can't afford anything else," she said sharply, cutting him off before. He could finish. Her cheeks flushed with heat. And before you suggest upgrading me or offering help, please don't. I appreciate what you did, but I'm not looking for someone to rescue me. Nathan's expression didn't shift into offense or defense. Instead, he simply nodded, his tone measured. You're right. I overstepped. I'm sorry. Emily turned her face away, adjusting Lily in her arms as a wall of guilt swelled in her chest. She hadn't meant to snap. It just came out. She was used to holding everything together alone, so tightly for so long that even the slightest offer of help felt like a threat to her independence. They reached the baggage claim area, and Nathan's phone began to vibrate in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and sighed. Work, he muttered. I need to take this. Just a minute. He stepped a few paces away and answered the call. The transformation was immediate. Nathan Caldwell here, he said, his voice crisp and commanding. Yes, I've reviewed the report. No, we're not cutting corners on the vetting process. For the housing program, these are families. Real people. Not statistics. Emily froze. Housing program. Her mind clicked into sharp focus. She turned slightly, just enough to hear more without making it obvious. I want to personally review every rejected application, Nathan continued firmly. If someone is genuinely in need and gets turned away because of red tape, we've failed. That's not who we are. Emily's stomach turned. Her ears rang with confusion, anger, and something close to betrayal. Housing program. Single mothers. Rejected applications. Her entire life. Her pain, her exhaustion, her vulnerability. She had spilled it all to him without filter. And now she knew why he had been so interested. Why he had sat in economy. Why he had helped. When Nathan returned, she turned to face him, her voice low and steady, but trembling underneath. That call, she said. The housing program you were talking about. How long has the Caldwell Foundation been running that? Nathan blinked, sensing a change in her tone. About 3 years now. It's one of our core programs. We've helped over 500 families find stable housing. And how do you find people for it? She asked, her jaw tightening. We have outreach teams, community partnerships. Sometimes people are referred by shelters or caseworkers. Sometimes we meet them in unexpected places. His last sentence landed like a blow. Emily felt a cold fury begin to rise. How convenient that you just happened to sit next to a struggling single mom, that you just happened to be kind and helpful, that you just happened to listen to my whole story, every detail. And now I find out you run a foundation that helps people like me. Nathan's face fell, realization dawning. Emily, no, it's not like that. Isn't it? She snapped, voice sharper now. Was I a case study to you, a walking recruitment target? Did you already plan to offer me a spot in one of your programs? Was this all one big setup so you could parade another success story? In your next press release. He stepped closer. That's not what this was. Don't lie to me, she hissed, her grip tightening on Lily. I let myself believe, for 1 second, that you were just a good person, that someone saw me as more than a poor single mom. But I was wrong, wasn't I? Other passengers were starting to stare. A few stepped away, awkward and quiet, while others watched with thinly veiled interest. I didn't plan this, Nathan said, his voice low and pleading. Yes, I'm in Boston for a program. Yes, I fly economy sometimes to stay connected. But helping you wasn't calculated. It was human. It was real. Emily shook her head. You listened to me pour out my life, and you already knew. You could fix it all. With one phone call, one signature, but you didn't tell me who you were. You waited, and now I feel like a fool. Nathan reached for her arm gently, but she stepped back. You want to know the worst part? She said, her voice breaking. I actually thought I mattered to you, that someone finally cared, but now I see it. I was just a project to you. No, he said, louder now. That's not true. But Emily didn't wait for another word. She turned away, heart pounding, tears hot in her eyes. She walked quickly through the terminal, head down, clutching her daughter close, wondering if she had just walked away from a lifeline or from another betrayal disguised as kindness. Emily's footsteps echoed through the terminal as she hurried away, not daring to look back. Her heart was racing, her vision blurred by angry tears. Lily stirred in her arms, sensing her mother's distress, but Emily shushed her gently, trying to calm the storm that raged inside both of them. She didn't stop until she reached the curb outside, where a line of taxis waited, but her hands were shaking too badly to open the app to call one. She sank onto a bench, clutching Lily tightly, still reeling from what had just happened. Behind her, footsteps approached. "Emily." Nathan's voice called, quiet but insistent. She turned to see him standing a few feet away, his face shadowed with concern and something deeper. Pain. Regret. "I know you don't want to talk to me right now," he said softly. "But please, let me explain." She looked away. "You've already said enough." "I haven't," he said, stepping closer. "Not the part that matters." She didn't speak, but she didn't walk away either. That was enough for him to continue. "Yes, I run the housing program. And yes, I came to Boston to visit one of our new partner shelters. But Emily, helping you on that flight, that wasn't business. That was me. Just me. I saw someone struggling, and I wanted to help, not as a CEO. As a person," Emily shook her head, bitter. "People like you don't help people like me unless there's something in it for them." Nathan's jaw tightened. His next words came slower. Raw. "My mother was a single mom," he said. "Her name was Maria Caldwell. She raised me by herself, after my father left when I was 7. Emily turned her head slightly, unsure if she had heard correctly. "She worked 3 jobs," Nathan continued. "One cleaning office buildings at night, one at a dry cleaner during the day, and one on weekends washing dishes at a diner. There were nights she didn't eat so I could have a full plate. Days she couldn't pay the electric bill, but she never let me see her cry." Emily stared at him, stunned. "She's the reason the foundation exists," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every woman we help. Every mother who feels like she's drowning. I do it for her, because I remember what it was like. I remember the eviction notices, the cold nights. I remember her sewing my clothes by hand. I remember thinking I'd never be enough to repay her." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The only sound was the quiet hum of traffic and the distant shuffle of suitcases. "I wasn't trying to manipulate you," Nathan said finally. "I didn't tell you who I was because people treat me differently when they know. They try to impress me, or they assume I'm only interested in them for publicity. I just wanted to be a person to you." Emily's anger was softening, but the hurt was still raw. "You let me open up to you," she said. "You let me spill my soul while knowing you could change everything with a phone call. You should have told me." Nathan nodded slowly. "And if I had?" he asked. "Would you have trusted me? Would you have let me hold Lily? Would you have let yourself fall asleep?" She opened her mouth, but no answer came, because he was right. If he had said, "Hi, I'm Nathan Caldwell, billionaire philanthropist," she would have shut down instantly. She would have assumed he had some agenda. She would never have leaned on his shoulder. She would never have let her guard fall. And yet now, knowing the truth, all she could feel was the sharp edge of betrayal. Lily fussed in her arms, reacting to the tension in the air. Emily gently rocked her, trying to hold it together. "I have to go," she said quietly. "My sister's expecting me." "Emily, please," Nathan said, reaching toward her. But she stepped back. I need space. I don't know what to believe right now." Nathan looked at her with something like desperation, like a man who had just watched something rare slip through his fingers. "I'm not giving up," he said quietly. "You matter to me, not because of what I do, not because of what I can offer, but because of who you are." Emily turned without answering and walked toward the street to flag a cab, Lily cradled tightly against her chest. With every step, she wondered if she had just walked away from something real, or saved herself from being another story in someone else's success report. The motel was just as dismal as Emily feared it would be. The wallpaper peeled in the corners, the air smelled faintly of mildew, and the heater clanged loudly every time it kicked on, like it was protesting the effort. She sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress trying to smooth the run in her only decent dress. Lily lay beside her, finally calm after a restless night in the unfamiliar space. Tomorrow was Brooke's wedding, and Emily still hadn't decided if she had the courage to show up. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Brooke, rehearsal dinner. Is it 7? You're still coming to the wedding tomorrow, right? The message was short, polite, but it lacked warmth. It didn't sound like a sister reaching out. It sounded like a duty. Emily stared at the screen, typing and deleting several replies before settling on, "Yes, I'll be there." What she didn't say, what she couldn't say, was that her heart had been in pieces since the airport, that her mind hadn't stopped racing since she walked away from Nathan. She kept replaying every word he said, and every word she had thrown back at him. Had she been wrong? A soft knock on the motel door pulled her from her thoughts. She crossed the room cautiously and peeked through the peephole. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. Standing in the hallway, wearing an elegant cream-colored coat and a nervous expression, was Brooke. Emily opened the door, uncertain. "Brooke?" Her sister stepped inside, her eyes scanning the shabby room with barely hidden discomfort. She sat down carefully on the only chair, as if trying not to touch anything more than necessary. "I came to talk before tomorrow," Brooke said. "If you're here to tell me not to come," Emily said, already defensive. "You don't have to bother. I know I don't belong at your perfect wedding. That's not why I'm here," Brooke replied quickly, surprising her. "Actually, I came to apologize, and to tell you something I should have said a long time ago." Emily blinked, caught off guard. Brooke had never apologized for anything in her life, especially not to her. 2 years ago, when we had that fight about your pregnancy, I said some awful things," Brooke began. "I told you that you were irresponsible, that you were ruining your life, that having a baby alone was selfish." "I remember," Emily said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Brooke looked down at her perfectly manicured hands, then back up. Her eyes shimmered. "What you didn't know was that I was pregnant too." Emily's breath caught. "I had been trying with Michael for almost a year, and when I found out you were pregnant, it hurt. Because you got something I wanted so desperately, and I was so angry, I lashed out." Emily stared at her sister, stunned. "I lost the baby 2 weeks after that fight," Brooke said, her voice breaking. "And instead of calling you, or apologizing, I buried myself in wedding plans and work. I acted like nothing happened." Tears were falling freely now, from both of them. "I've spent 2 years being angry at you for having what I couldn't keep," Brooke whispered. Emily walked over slowly and sat beside her, reaching for her hand. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I wish I'd known. I wish I could have been there for you." They sat like that for a moment, the silence between them finally soft and full of understanding, not bitterness. But Brooke wasn't finished. "That's not all," she said, wiping her eyes. "Yesterday, a man called my office, asking for you, said he had something urgent to tell you, but you weren't answering your phone. When he found out I was your sister, he asked if we could meet." Emily's heart stopped. "Nathan?" Brooke nodded. "Nathan Caldwell, yes." Emily's chest tightened. "What did he say?" she asked carefully. Brooke looked her straight in the eyes. "He said he's been trying to find you for 2 days. Not because of the foundation, not because of some program, but because he's in love with you." Emily stared, her mouth slightly open. "That's impossible. We barely know each other." "That's what I told him," Brooke said. "But then he talked for 20 minutes straight, about you, about Lily, about the way you made him remember why he started his work in the first place. He wasn't talking like a CEO. He was talking like a man who found something and lost it." Emily's hands trembled. "He told me he didn't help you because of your situation. He helped you because he saw you, because you mattered to him before he even knew your name. She opened her phone and showed Emily an old news article. The headline read, "Caldwell CEO launches housing initiative in memory of late mother in." The photo. Nathan stood in front of a modest apartment complex, cutting a ribbon with one hand while the other held a single white rose. "Read the quote," Brooke said. Emily read it aloud. "My mother, Maria Caldwell, raised me alone after my father walked out. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. This program exists so no mother has to choose between paying rent and feeding her child. She gave up everything for me, and now it's my turn to give back." Brooke looked up. His mother was a single mom from a working-class neighborhood. She cleaned buildings at night and worked in a laundry during the day. "He understands you, Emily. Not because he studied people like you, but because he was you." Emily sank down on the bed, overwhelmed, all the pain, all the suspicion, all the harsh words at the airport. And now this. Proof that he hadn't just seen her as a charity case, but as someone who reminded him of the most important person he'd ever loved. Brooke took a breath and added softly, "He's staying at the hotel where the wedding is tomorrow. I invited him. After hearing everything, I thought maybe you two were supposed to meet. And maybe I was supposed to help fix what got broken." Emily looked over at Lily, who was awake now, watching her with big, curious eyes. Could she really walk away from this? From someone who saw her and loved her exactly as she was? "I don't know if I'm brave enough," Emily whispered. Brooke smiled gently. "Emily, you're the bravest person I know." The next evening, Emily stood just outside the grand ballroom of the hotel where Brooke's wedding reception was already in full swing. She was wearing a borrowed dress from her sister, an emerald green gown that shimmered under the hallway light. It hugged her waist and fell to the floor with elegance she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in forever, she didn't feel like the tired waitress from Phoenix. She felt like someone who belonged. Lily was upstairs in a hotel suite, with a babysitter Brooke had arranged. She had fallen asleep quickly, curled up in warm blankets, peaceful as ever. Through the glass-paneled doors, Emily could see the soft golden light of chandeliers casting a warm glow over the celebration. Guests milled about in tailored suits and elegant dresses. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne, and a string quartet played in the background. She spotted Brooke dancing with her new husband, looking radiant in her wedding gown, and then she saw him, Nathan, sitting alone at a table near the back, dressed in a sleek black tuxedo. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't mingling. He was simply watching the doors, waiting. When their eyes met through the glass, something shifted. Gone was the tension of the airport. Gone was the doubt. In Nathan's gaze, she saw something steady, something vulnerable, something real. It wasn't pity. It wasn't guilt. It was love, the kind that made her feel seen. Slowly, she opened the door and stepped inside. The music played on, but for her, the world felt quiet. As she moved across the room, people noticed, but only one person mattered. Nathan stood up the moment she came near, his expression unreadable, like he was afraid to hope too much. "I was afraid you wouldn't come," he said softly. Emily gave a faint smile. "I was afraid too." He tilted his head slightly. "But you're here." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Someone told me recently that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you do the right thing, even when you are." Nathan took a cautious step forward. "I should have told you everything from the beginning, not just about who I am, but about how I felt. The moment you let me hold Lily, the moment you leaned on my shoulder, something changed. I knew. My life would never be the same." Emily's breath hitched. "Nathan." He gently lifted a hand to stop her, not out of dominance, but out of quiet desperation to say what he needed to say. "I don't want to help you because I think you need saving. I want to build something with you. A family. A life. I want to wake up every morning knowing I get to be with the woman who reminded me why I started everything in the first place." He took another step closer. "And I want to be Lily's father, not because she needs one, but because I already love her, completely." Tears streamed down Emily's face, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from something deeper, something healing. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you the moment you held her like she was yours." She stepped into him, and he wrapped his arms around her like he'd been waiting forever to do so. They kissed, not like strangers or dreamers, but like people who had fought through the noise of the world and finally found each other in the quiet. When they pulled apart, Nathan smiled through damp eyes. "So," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, "would you like to dance? Because I think this is where our real story begins." Emily laughed softly, took his hand, and nodded. "Yes, let's begin." They stepped onto the ballroom floor, together, hand in hand. The music slowed to a gentle waltz, and the crowd seemed to fade into the background as Nathan guided Emily into the dance. His hand rested lightly on her waist, hers on his shoulder, their fingers interlocked like two pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. Emily hadn't danced in years. She felt awkward at first, uncertain, out of rhythm. But Nathan's presence was grounding. His touch was steady, his movements easy, natural. He made her feel like she belonged in that elegant room, like she was the only woman there. For the first time in so long, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel small. She felt loved. Around them, the wedding celebration swirled on. Laughter, champagne, clinking glasses. But in their corner of the world, time slowed. Nathan leaned in close. "Just so you know," he whispered with a small smile, "I plan on spending the rest of my life proving that you and Lily are the best things that ever happened to me." Emily laughed, her chest swelling with something warm and limitless. "You know," she said, eyes sparkling, "for a man who likes to fly under the radar, you're really bad at being subtle." Nathan grinned. "I make exceptions for exceptional people." They danced for a while longer, neither wanting the moment to end. Eventually, Brooke joined them on the floor with her husband, flashing Emily a smile that said everything words couldn't. Later that night, as the reception wound down and guests filtered out with hugs and farewells, Nathan led Emily out onto the quiet balcony overlooking the city. The Boston skyline glittered beyond them, lights shimmering on the water. Lily was back upstairs with the sitter, sound asleep, blissfully unaware that her world had just changed forever. "I know this is all moving fast," Nathan said, his tone more serious now. "And I know you've had to do everything on your own for a long time, but I want to be part of this life, your life, if you'll let me." Emily looked at him, not at the suit or the status or the title, but at the man, the one who had offered her peace on a noisy flight, the one who had seen her not as a problem to solve, but as a woman worth standing beside. "You don't have to carry it all anymore," he said softly. "Not alone." She stepped closer, resting her head against his chest. "You're right," she said. "I don't." And as he held her there, beneath the stars and city lights, Emily knew this wasn't a rescue story. This wasn't about being saved. This was about choosing someone who chose you back, with all your struggles, with all your scars, and it was about building something new, together. When they went back inside, hand in hand, the world hadn't changed, but their world had. And upstairs, a little girl slept soundly, her future no longer uncertain, her family no longer incomplete. Emily had boarded a plane with nothing but a baby in her arms and a broken heart in her chest. And she walked away with the kind of love she'd never dared to dream was real. A week later, back in Phoenix, Emily stood in the doorway of her old apartment, the one with peeling paint, flickering lights, and the noisy pipes that rattled each night. She was holding Lily in one arm and a letter in the other. It was folded neatly, the paper thick, with a silver Caldwell Foundation seal at the top. Inside were two things: the approval for a fully furnished housing unit in a safe neighborhood, and an offer, one that would change everything. Nathan hadn't just kept his promise, he had gone above and beyond it. But this time, It didn't feel like charity. It felt like partnership, like family. He had insisted the apartment be in her name. No strings, no conditions, just stability. Emily had hesitated at first. She didn't want a handout, but Nathan had. Looked her in the eyes and said something she couldn't forget. It's not a handout. It's a hand to hold if you want it. And she did. That same day, she packed up the apartment. The crib, the photos, the memories. She said goodbye to the shadows and doubt that had once filled this tiny space. She and Lily moved into the new apartment 3 days later. It was modest, 2 bedrooms, warm light through tall windows, a little community garden just outside, but it felt like the beginning of something that finally made sense. Nathan visited every evening. Some nights he brought dinner. Some nights he brought books for Lily. Most nights he simply showed up, with quiet joy, with steadiness, with love. He never tried to fill the spaces Emily didn't offer. He just stood beside her as she slowly let them open. One afternoon, as Emily watched him on the floor helping Lily stack colorful blocks into a tower, she felt a tear slip down her cheek. Not from sadness, from relief, from peace, from the overwhelming realization that somehow all the pain had led here, to a living room filled with giggles, warmth, and a man who hadn't come to rescue her, but to stay. And on the night he knelt in that same room and asked her, without grandeur or spotlight, if she'd let him build a future with her and Lily. She said yes. Not because she needed him, but because she wanted him. Because love, when it's real, doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives gently, sometimes in the seat beside you on a red-eye flight, sometimes in the arms that hold your crying baby like she's already theirs, and sometimes in the second chance you never believed you deserved.